Hello, welcome to this Unreal Engine 5 tutorial. Today we will be starting the foundation for a third-person shooter. We will be going over how to set up your character with animations, and we will set up the basics for the third-person, like camera and running around and such, ADSing. In the next episode, we will set up the weapons. For the project, all I've done is I created a blank project with the third person template. So if I open my content drawer, what I have here is the third person starter content, the third person with the default character. I've also imported a Mixmo character with some animations. I've also imported from the Unreal Engine Marketplace. This is a free asset pack. It's just a couple weapons to play around with. I didn't mean to open materials twice. So that we can just, have something to build with. Alright, so to get started, let's just press play and see if everything works. Seems to be working just fine. Alright. So the very first thing I like to do when I open a brand new project is I'll go to Content, and I'll make a new folder, and I'll call it Framework. In Framework, I'll make another folder called Game Instance, and I'll make another folder called Game Mode. Then I'll always go right here. I'll always make a new game mode right off the bat. So just type in game mode. Call it GM_test. And now in the future, for any testing, we're going to use this as our game mode. And what you need to do is go over here to the default pawn class and switch it to the BP third person character. Compile, save, close that. Go over to the world settings, game mode override, game mode tests, save. Now if you press play, nothing will change, but now we can customize the game mode, and it's like our game mode. So now that we have that, let's swap out the default mannequin with the one that I imported from Mixmo. So if we go here, you just click over here where it says character mesh. I'm going to swap it over to SWAT guy, and there we go. But he is T-posing, and that's not ideal. So what we're going to do about that is we have to make a new animation class, the animation blueprint. So if you go to wherever you saved your mesh that you want to use, so right here, if you right click on it and press create, you can make an animation blueprint. I'm going to name it ABP_SWAT guy. in here, just for good measure, just off of here, just type in slot, default slot. This is for animation montages, and we're going to move this around and stuff, but I always forget to put it in, so I might as well do it now and such. So then off of there, now in order to get the animations to work, we're also going to need an animation blend space. We're going to make a blend space 1D, but later we're going to make a blend space like a normal blend space. This is just to get things rolling. So let's do blend space underscore SWAT guy underscore idle underscore let's call it run. Okay. So when you open this up, over here you want to go to horizontal axis. Now, the minimum is the slowest your person can go, so obviously 0, but if you want to make it so that there's an animation when they run backwards, you would do like negative right here. And the maximum is the maximum that they can go for this animation graph. By default, I believe it's 500. You find that by going to your character blueprint, their character movement speed, going off to max walk speed, 500. So if we go back here, max walk speed, 500. Okay, so it's set to 500. That's your max walk speed. Let's name the horizontal axis. Let's just call it speed. Alright. So now we need to set what is happening when your character is not moving at all. So let's go to rifle idle. One of the animations I imported. So when they're just standing still, this is the animation I want to play. Now when they're running, like moving max speed, I want it to go to this one. You can preview this in this little viewport here by holding Control and moving your mouse, and that little X there will show you, okay, if they're running 500 meters per second, this will be the animation that plays. That's perfect. And actually, just for simplicity's sake, let's delete that one. Let's use the idle aiming animation. Okay. Okay, so here, what I want to do now is get that blend space that we just made and drag it into the graph. Oops. So now, basically it's going to have that blend space, except it's going to only show 0 because the input node here is only 0, so it's only going to ever read 0. So if we play, oh, sorry, before we do that, what we need to do is we need to go to the mesh on your character blueprint. You need to apply that animation blueprint that we're building. So ABP SWAT guy. You can even preview it here. But since the input is 0, it's always going to be 0. So what we need to do is promote that to a variable. Highlight all of this, press Q so it all lines up nicely. Then we need to go to the event graph. So now what we need to do is we need to get a reference to the owner of this animation blueprint. So let's get the event begin play. off of the event begin play, let's cast to BP third person character, because that is the name of the character that we are playing as. You can delete that, and then off of the object, write get player character. Now, just to keep this in mind, if you're planning on making a multiplayer game, this all has to be different. However, and that's just because this is very, I'm not going to get into multiplayer because this tutorial is aimed at beginners, but if you want to make a multiplayer, just keep in mind this is a lot more complicated. So now what we're going to do is we're going to promote this variable, promote this to variable, and let's just call this player ref. Now in the update animation, let's get the player ref. If you right click on that, you can press convert to validated get. Right here, you want to drag off this blue pin, and you want to write get velocity, and then off of there, you're going to write length. And then from there, you just want to set the speed variable that we made earlier. Okay, so now if we press play, our character runs. Now we want to make a third-person shooter here, so we want to aim the character where the camera is pointing, you know, so we can shoot things. And there, in order to do that, we click on the character here, and you type in orient rotation to movement. And if you click that off, now the character will not move, but they still won't follow the camera. You want to look up use controller desired rotation and click that on. Now they will follow the camera. Now it looks funny, the running animation, when you run sideways or backwards. And this is what I was talking about with the blend spaces. So the animation 1D, the blend space 1D rather, is what is detecting the character running forward and backwards. And that's why that animation plays, but when you go left and right, since we're just getting a reference to the character velocity in general, it's going to play that animation because it's saying the velocity of that character is over 1, you know, it's going to play that blend space. So it doesn't matter what you go. If you do a normal blend space instead of a 1D, then you have to take the direction of the character into account, and then that's how you can blend different blend spaces. And that is something we will get to in a future video, as well as aiming. Right now the character looks straight no matter what way I point the camera. We will fix that with something called an aim offset. Again, that will be in a future video because that gets a little complicated. So right now we have our character. They can move around, they have their neat little animation set up, but the camera is all off. It's way behind. How are you supposed to see the enemies, let alone shoot them? You know, you can't even see them. So let's make the camera a little better. So in the viewport, so by default the camera is right here, the camera boom. That connects the actual camera that you see while you're playing the game to the character. So first I'm going to move it up a little bit. Let's see how that looks. Okay. Cool. Now I want to make it a little closer, and I want to put it off a little to the right. And you might be thinking, we'll just pull this forward and pull it to the right. And yeah, you could do that, and sure, you'll have that offset view. However, later on down the road, when you want to implement ADSing or you just want to change the camera perspective at all, it's going to make it a lot more complicated and annoying. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to use the socket offset and target offset. When you have the camera boom selected over here, you can change these. So let's change the target arm length, which is the distance the camera is from the player. Let's change that to about 200. And let's see how that works. Okay, well now, whoa, we're really close. That's fine though, because what we can do is we can change the offset of the camera right here. Let's change it. Let's see what happens if we give it a positive 50. Okay, it's off to the right. Perfect, but we're still a little too close. Okay. Maybe a little more to the right. And there you go. That's how you can customize it the easiest way. And when we get into moving the camera around for like maybe a cinematic moment or simply to ADS, that is going to be much easier. And speaking of ADSing, let's get that out of the park next. Okay, so to get into ADSing, well, first let's open our character blueprint. Okay, so we need to make an input for it. In order to make an input, you should go to this folder here, which comes with the third person template under third person. Go to actions, right click, input. Let's call it input action IA underscore ADS. Now under the IMC default, let's open that. Let's add a mapping IAADS. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. To bind it to a key, you click on this little keyboard here, and then you press whatever key you want. For me, I'm going to do right mouse button. Or you can click on this little arrow here and just select it out of this drop down. Okay, so let's just make sure that works. So in our event graph, let's find some space. Right click and search IA underscore ADS. And then under started, let's go print string. And then completed, Let's print another string. Now let's see if that works. ADS start, ADS finish. Now let's go ahead and make a Boolean and call it ADS. Let's set it to true. Then alpha completed. Let's set it to false. Now we need to think about where we want the camera while it's ADS. So actually, let me open that in a new window. Get a little more experience of how an actual player would see it. So I think by default, we're actually going to move the camera back out a little bit. And then when it's ADS, we're going to push it in and a little bit to the right. So if we go back out here, camera boon, let's actually set this back to 400. Okay. Now under ADS, let's drag the camera boom into the graph here. And let's set target arm length to, let's say, 100. Let's copy and paste that node and put it back to its default of 400. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that's maybe a little close, but it's working. Let's try 200. I'd say that looks pretty good. Now, it's a little jarring, kind of snappy, so let's fix that by adding something called a timeline. Add timeline. Let's call it ADS. And what you want to do is, on the started, you want to play it, and on completed, you want to reverse it. Now, if you double click on this node, the first thing we want to do is change the length from 5 seconds to something more like 1 second, because we want it to be kind of snappy. We don't want it to be sluggish at all. Click on float track and add a float track. We'll just call it ADS, I don't know, float track. In here, you're going to right click on the graph and set that first node to have default values of 0 and 0. Then you're going to right click again on this graph and add another key and change the time to the max time you set, the length, and the value to 1. Close that tab. Now what you're going to do is you're going to actually delete this, and you're going to drag off of here, and you're going to say lerp. You're going to type in the word lerp, And you're going to take this green pin that's now here, since we added that track, you're going to plug it into the alpha. For the A, you're going to put in 200. And for the B, you're going to put in 400. Now when you press it, oh, I'm sorry, I got these backwards. 400, 200. Okay. It's ADSing, sure. It's quite slow though. So I'm going to open that timeline back up and I'm going to make this 0.25. Make sure I find that last node and change its time to 0.25. See how that looks? Okay, it's a lot snappier. What it'll do for now. There is something I want to change though. I want to change the animation so that when he is not ADS, he is resting his rifle, but when he's ADS, he's ready to shoot. It's quite easy. If I go to the animation blueprint that we built, off of here, I write get ADS, which is that variable we just made, and I promote that to a variable on the animation blueprint. If I drag this off, hold Alt to delete that connection, drag off of that and type in cache. Let's call this locomotion. Now off of this slot default, let's get a layered blend per bone. Up here in the layer setup, we need to get the name of the bone we want to layer it at. So we're going to actually open up this skeleton so we can see which one we want to do. Spine is fine in this case. So copy selected bone names and just paste it there. Okay, and now it's not doing anything obviously because there's nothing plugged into it. So drag off of both of those and just type in locomotion. Copy and paste that there. Okay. Now what we want to do is actually delete this bottom one here and replace it with this. Just drag it off of there, just your idle aiming. Loop animation. Compile, save. Test to make sure it works. It doesn't work because it looks off to the left. The easy way to fix that is clicking on that and using mesh space rotation. Just click that. Okay. So off of this layered blend, we actually want to get another blend by Bool, and we want to get ADS. And then off of the false, let's get the idle animation, and also make sure that is looping. And that is how we're going to do the ADS. Next time, we're going to make the upper body animation not look so stiff and boring. We're going to tweak these numbers to make the camera look nicer. Make this transition feel a little better. We're going to add the weapon and the ability to shoot and what that's going to look like. And we're going to look into jumping animations and also strafing animations.